This is Vasant from Karnataka's Danagalli village. This is Rahul Sonwani from Phool Sagar village in Madhya Pradesh. Both of them have received improved cook stoves under a carbon offset project. But what is the point of these offsets if the villagers do not use the cook stoves regularly? Janni Mithula and Lalita own coffee plantations in the Araku Valley. The coffee saplings are provided by the Nandi Foundation, a part of the carbon offset project of Paris-based livelihoods funds. But what is the value of these offsets if the tribals of Araku had been growing this coffee for decades, much before carbon credits even came into existence in the picture? Moreover, the people we spoke to are not aware of carbon credits. Buying and selling carbon, otherwise known as the carbon market, is seen as an important way to combat climate change. Extreme weather events are costing all economies. Thus, the idea of gaining credits for reducing greenhouse gases and then trading those credits for the right price can not only help developing nations financially, but it can also help them transition to a clean economy. It is a win-win scenario. However, many of these stories highlight the loopholes in the carbon markets. This makes matters worse as it creates a positive facade to an ever-growing problem. Before going into the loopholes of the credits, let's understand what the carbon credit market really is. It is simple in some ways, complicated in others. Because of this carbon market, you will be able to pick up a luxury bag that is labeled carbon neutral, or you could take a flight that has offset your emissions, or even read about an oil or food company that has declared a net carbon footprint. You may wonder how. These items and companies become carbon neutral by buying credits, which are then issued against certain planet healing activities. Think of these activities as credit cards that either reduce greenhouse gas emissions, like, for example, building a solar plant or using an efficient cook stove, or they can remove gases, greenhouse gases from the atmosphere. For instance, you could plant trees which will absorb carbon dioxide. The management of this market of buyers and sellers is done through a paraphernalia of registries, project developers, validators, verifiers, and carbon exchanges. But the fact is that there is no official carbon market in the world, as the global community is still discussing the rules that will govern such a trade. In the past decade or so, however, a voluntary carbon market, also known as the VCM, has grown with projects across the world. India generates 1/5 of the world's carbon credits, and it is thus at the forefront of carbon investment.
On the 11th of July, we reached out to a representative of a developer named DTE Energy Services with some questions about their project and a request to visit them. The representative declined to discuss the projects and denied our request for visits. We attempted to contact others within the organization, but this led us nowhere. On the 8th of August, we visited DTE's office and were informed that visits could not be arranged due to client confidentiality agreements. In a similar fashion, we continued to reach out to developers, standard setters, verifiers, and traders. What unfolded was unexpected. Countless calls, messages, and elusive meetings left us with little information. Some demanded NDAs, while others protected project locations under client agreements. Livelihoods Fund, a Paris-based developer, denied site visits citing poor road conditions during the monsoons and insurgency issues in Araku. The entire process took over 3 months before we finally decided to gather information we had by scrutinizing hundreds of project documents and news reports. This led us from NGOs, local leaders, and some developers to individuals who were the subjects of various projects that earned carbon credits. We tracked and followed these projects in 40 locations across 4 states. With our findings and subsequent analysis, we once again approached organizations associated with these projects, but a series of emails resulted in only a handful of responses. This illustrates how challenging it was to gain insight into the activities of just a few projects in a market that promotes public benefits. Price or RE plus biogas. If the purpose of the market is to invest in projects that will lead to reduction in emissions in different parts of the world, then the market must be based on paying for the real cost of the projects. We found that the market is actually paying a fraction of renewable energy project or a biogas project, a clear pittance as compared to the cost of building these projects. The second was the overestimation of credits. In distributing cookstoves, developers assumed that by merely distributing cookstoves to people, they would use these devices and these devices only, willfully ignoring the fact that some of them already had LPG cylinders. Furthermore, they assumed that people's behavior would change solely by providing them cookstoves. This led to a serious overestimation of emission reduction claims from such projects. Third, benefits to communities. Training and saplings. This is what a farmer in Araku Valley gets from a carbon credit project based on plantation of trees. Farmers putting in the labor on his or her own land, but earning none of the millions fetched from the carbon credits. A rural household paying for a cook stove, but getting nothing in return when they help cut emissions by using it. The poor are essentially subsidizing or laboring for the emission reductions of the rich. The most critical issue is to whose account should the abated carbon be credited. This is not a hypothetical question, but a real one. To achieve the target of 50% of India's electric power requirements from non-fossil fuel sources, every megawatt of renewable power will need to be counted and factored in. Some 675 Indian renewable energy projects are registered under Verra and Gold Standard registries for 268 million carbon credits, of which 148 million have been claimed against offsets. So how can these be accounted for India's NDCs or nationally determined contributions? Or can they be? Will this lead to double counting?
The current carbon market could in fact end up increasing emissions in the world. The buyer of the credit, let's say an airline company that has assured its customers to offset its carbon footprint, or a food company that has declared itself net zero, they have continued to emit, and they have in fact even increased their emissions, saying that they have bought credits. But as these credits have been overestimated or they may not really exist, the reductions are notional. This is a double jeopardy. This is also the agenda for the upcoming COP28 in Dubai. For more insight into the world of carbon markets and how to regulate them, do read our latest issue, Discredited, and for more such explainers as these, follow our latest series, Call for Action.